Welcome everyone today by a new interview. Last week we've done Elrond with Benjamin Minku. This week we're going to have a conversation with Amrit Kumar, co-founder of Zilliqa. We're going to discuss everything about the project, the progress, what we're going to expect from it, what they are trying to achieve, and how they deal with the regulations. So let's start. Welcome everyone. This is me, Crypto Michael, and today I'm going to interview co-founder Amrit Kumar of Zilliqa. Welcome. Nice to meet you. How
Nice
are
to
you
meet you,
doing?
Michael. Great to be here.
How are you doing today?
I would say still alive, given everything that's happening around the world and the COVID. Yeah, I'm glad to be alive and talking to you. Yeah,
Well, at least your phone is still alive. Your laptop is having some hard time, but let's first discuss who you are. We know you that you are the co-founder of Zilliqa, but what is your background? What made you decide to go into the blockchain space? Could you give some insights on you as a person before we can discuss Zilliqa?
sure. Well, my background is in research. So I have a PhD in INRIA from France, which is a research institute in France, INRIA. My research was basically around security and privacy of software systems. So, for example, when you use an antivirus or any software that you download or install to run on your system, my idea was to understand what sort of security and privacy implications they have on you. So, if you use an antivirus, it may scan all the files that are on your system, and it may potentially send some of the data, sensitive data that could be present in those files to outside parties. So I was basically trying to understand what sort of risks are there in terms of security and privacy. And then it was around that time that Bitcoin was becoming popular from a research angle. So researchers were actually looking into Bitcoin and blockchains and trying to understand what's interesting in this technology. What can we do? What sort of problems it solves, and what sort of how we can improve that so that it can solve other problems essentially. It was around that time that I finished my PhD and I was looking for the next opportunity. So I went over to Singapore, basically followed my wife there, who got a job there. So I went over to Singapore and I decided to work at the National University of Singapore, which is one of the best institutes around the world. And the goal was to be able to work on blockchain projects. So interestingly, when I joined there, and my advisor at the university basically said, there's nothing interesting left now. All the interesting, challenging problems have been solved. Well, let's try something else. So we actually tried something else, and then we fell back to blockchains, especially from a privacy angle, because around the time Monero was becoming very popular. It had just come out. Dash was there.
Mm-hmm.
Zcash was getting launched, and so I thought that it looks like it's a good project, and we should try to investigate Monero from a privacy angle and see whether there's whatever claim they're making in terms of privacy, is it valid or not. So that's how I first got involved into blockchain. So I first read the white paper of Monero before reading the white paper of Bitcoin. And so I got a sense of how Bitcoin works by reading how Monero works, basically, and the other way around.
That's something, yeah.
So that was interesting, and around that time, I was very heavily into privacy. So I was looking into all the mixers that were coming up, CoinJoin, and a bunch of things were happening on Ethereum. There was Tumblebit that came up, and so on. So there was a lot of work that was being done in privacy back then, and I was really into that. Once I'd finished this work on Monero, I felt, okay, what's next? And this is when my advisor came back to me and said, look, we had a paper that we had published with the CEO of Kyber Network, Loy Liu. So this CEO of Kyber Network was actually a student of my advisor back then, and they had together published this paper around how to scale blockchains. And they had this idea of sharding and use sharding to be able to scale blockchains. And he came to me and said, look, now that you have finished this, maybe you want to try this out. And we're planning to commercialize this. And would you be interested in joining this project with us? And I said, yeah, sure. So I basically switched over from research to actually joining this Zilliqa founding team. Back then, we were 7 people. Many of them, I think all of them back then, were somehow associated with the university. So we all had either studied at NUS or did PhD at NUS, or we did postdoctoral research there. And this is how Zilliqa was started, and I got involved into Zilliqa.
Well, that's a funny story, going from the university ending up in Zilliqa, or at least from that perspective. Do you believe that over the years the overall view from universities have changed towards blockchain?
I mean, obviously, initially it was, there were two camps of some sort. So you had people in the, you know, you could say the Bitcoin era, like Adam and those sort of people who were very adamant about Bitcoin can change the world. And then you had the academic world which said, show me something more. I can't believe in something that's not rigorous, because from their perspective, today even I can very boldly claim that today, if you take the Bitcoin white paper and submit to any conference of any level, I mean, of any merit, by the way, it's bound to get rejected. One, because it didn't have the academic rigor that academics actually like to see. And so from that angle, academics were not very serious about Bitcoin for a long time, until they realized that actually it is interesting, because it solves a challenge. Even though there's not much rigor, the idea is there, and this idea actually works in practice. And this, just after that, I think then the academics became very serious about Bitcoin. They started to work on privacy aspects of Bitcoin. They started looking to how to scale blockchains and so on. So a lot of work actually came first from the developers, and there was a divide. I think over time that gap sort of came closer and closer. And now today you can see quite a few blockchain projects are actually coming from academia. Like, let's say, Zilliqa, Cardano has academic associations. Let's say, Algorand came from MIT and so on. So it shows to you that over time, the stand of academia towards blockchain has actually changed dramatically.
And it's just also probably that people are opening their eyes and getting out of the tunnel vision and outside of those frameworks that they are thinking in, and now they are expecting, or like they're working with ideas that are not fitting that framework but could still work. And that's a shift that we can actually see, I guess, right now.
Exactly. And this is kind of the change that I think Bitcoin has sort of started, where they basically said that, look, here's the real world problem. I'm going to give you a solution to this. Yes, you could argue that the solution is not perfect, or you don't have the mathematics behind it. It's not super clear to you, but actually it works in practice and it solves a real problem. Now it's the time where academics can chip in and more formalize the whole thing, the whole model in a proper way. So it definitely has there has been a shift from a developer-run system or developer-run project to academic involvement along with development. So that has been a good shift.
It's a little from the small kids working on it in like tech geeks going towards like bigger groups of people working on it on universities and mass adoption. That's a beautiful thing. You've mentioned Bitcoin could solve some problems, and then we get towards Zilliqa. What is the vision and goal of Zilliqa, and what is Zilliqa trying to solve? Or which problem is it trying to solve?
Yeah. So when we started Zilliqa, we were looking at two main problems. One was certainly around scalability. So we were looking at Bitcoin and Ethereum back then. They were decently successful, right? People were actually interested in Bitcoin, even though from, let's say, speculative angle, they knew the promise that the technology could provide eventually. And but when we saw ICOs happening, when we saw CryptoKitties popping up, it was quite apparent that Ethereum, or the blockchain, the way it was presented or narrated to the rest of the world as a world computer, it was not quite a world computer. It was not even more than a world calculator back then, in that sense. So people understood that this platform or a blockchain can be successful only if it has the ability to provide the necessary, let's say, throughput, or the necessary, features that an application would need to be able to be successful. Because remember, CryptoKitties, when they were launched, they realized that they had to cut down on features just to be able to run that on Ethereum. Otherwise, the gas fees would be tremendous. So we looked at that angle and we felt that, okay, we need to be able to improve that infrastructure to be able to provide a platform that can scale in some sense. So that was one problem. The second problem that we faced, or we're seeing back then, was around smart contract safety. So we obviously, I don't know anyone had imagined, but very quickly, once Ethereum had launched, smart contracts were becoming very popular. One angle was to, of course, raise funds through ICOs, but also to actually hold funds. We had seen DAO holding a substantial number of Ether in the contract. We saw Parity multi-sig wallet holding a substantial number of funds for Polkadot. back then. So we had seen all these tokens and contracts that were actually holding substantial amount of money. And when you had such a system, then you want to make sure that that contract is actually safe and secure, right?
Yes.
But on the contrary, we saw hacks happening every now and then. Even today, every now and then you'd see something happening on the DeFi space where contracts get hacked or someone does a rug pull and all sorts of things happen. So we felt that there was, when the smart contract language that Solidity was designed, it was designed from a developer-friendly perspective. So make it easier for people to write anything that they want or develop anything that they want. But they didn't realize the fact that those contracts can actually go and handle substantial money. And therefore, you need more safety properties. So there was certainly a trade-off between how safe your contract can be and how, let's say, easy it is to write all sorts of fancy applications that you would want to. So we felt that it would be good to build a language that could restrict, in some sense, or limit some features at the expense of giving them more, making them more secure and more safer. And so two problems. One was to improve scalability, and that's what Zilliqa does. And the second thing is to provide a language that people can safely write their contracts in.
Well, let's discuss that scalability first, as right now we are living in an ecosystem where Ethereum gas fees are just ridiculous. If we use Uniswap or anything, we have to pay $100 in gas fees to transfer something. How is Zilliqa going to fix this? Or what technique are you going to use to fix that?
Right. So in the legacy systems like Bitcoin, Ethereum, so let's say I'm a user and I want to send a transaction. The way it works essentially is you write your transaction, you say, okay, I want to transfer, let's say $10 to Michael, I mean, $10 worth of some asset to Michael. I sign that transaction, I send it to the network, right? And this network may consist of 10,000 or 100,000 nodes. And more or less, each one of these 1,000 or 10,000 nodes are going to process your transactions. They're going to check whether my account has enough funds, whether I'm trying to do double spend and so on, right? And only if they're satisfied that this transaction gets validated and recorded in the blockchain in some sense. So it's very decentralized because if any one of those nodes or 10 of those nodes go down, things will still keep on running. So very secure, very decentralized, but at the same time, it's somewhat redundant because imagine sending a small value dollar value transaction and then 100,000 computers processing that transaction. So we felt that one way to improve this is by not asking entire network to process your transaction, but only a subset of that network will process your transaction. Okay, and as long as you set that network, smaller network, in a very efficient and secure way, your transaction will still be processed in a safe way. So, for example, in Zilliqa, what we do is we take that 10,000 nodes network and you divide them into smaller groups. So you could have, for example, 10 groups each containing 1,000 nodes, right? Now, of course, as long as if each of these smaller nodes has only one node, then everything becomes centralized and doesn't work. So you need to make sure that each smaller network is sufficiently decentralized to be able to process your transaction safely. So now when you send your transaction to this Zilliqa network, which is sharded now, so all these smaller groups are called shards, then your transaction will land up into one of those shards, not all of them, only one of them. And only that shard is going to process your transaction, right? So what may happen is that, let's say you and me, we send transactions in parallel to the network. Your transaction may go to shard number 1, and my transaction may go to shard number 2. And both these transactions can be processed in parallel. And eventually what ends up happening is that the more shards you have, the more transactions you can process because everything is now being done in parallel. So that's the beauty of what sharding does and how Zilliqa scales from that angle. And with that, we did some tests internally, back in 2017. And even recently, someone from the community spammed the entire network endlessly for, I think, 8 hours with a very tiny transaction volume, amount. And he was able to send, I think, more than 1 million transactions in 8 hours, and he paid less than $10 of fees on the network. So that kind of gives you an idea of what sharding can do to scale your network and lower your fees.
Well, then I've got some questions. It's like having $10 in fees is amazing. Like that's what we all wish for. But then Ethereum is also developing a new POS system. How do you see that? Well, it could solve a part of the scalability issue that Ethereum has, right?
Okay, so what Ethereum is building is what they call a state sharding system, which is unfortunately, given that Ethereum is already running and there are all sorts of dApps running on the chain, it's not so easy to build that. And that's exactly why Ethereum has planned this entire state sharded system in phases. And what you have seen today, and this is what ETH 2.0 basically is, but what we have seen today or so far is the phase 0 of ETH 2.0 launch, which is basically nothing but staking launched on the system. But it doesn't go do anything beyond that. You will, in order to process transactions shards, in order to process you have your virtual machine that runs, it will hopefully come by phase 4. I don't know when it might happen, but it's not going to be anytime soon for sure. But I'm really hopeful that it can happen, because people who are actually using Ethereum are definitely dying to get a more scalable platform where they can transact. So it will definitely take time, and there are certainly challenges that they will face, that we have been facing as well when we started implementing sharding. And these challenges are not so easy to handle for sure.
That's definitely the overall technology is not easy at all. But another challenge that you're facing is that because of the entire problems Ethereum has, there are new network systems or ecosystems right now. For instance, Binance Smart Chain with the DeFi sector, but you also have the Atom ecosystem and Polkadot. How are you going to work with that, as they might be solving that on the first layer already?
Yeah, so there are two sorts of, I won't call them competition, because I think in this world, everyone takes ideas from everyone else. So it's a very open-minded, I think, space we live in. But obviously, there are two sorts of projects that we're looking at, right? One is parallel L1 chains like Zilliqa, let's say Algorand and Polkadot, not Polkadot, but more like Adano and so on. So these are all L1 chains. And then there are L2 layers as well, built to be able to scale Ethereum, like Matic, it's a Binance chain, and so on. So there are a lot of L1, and the distinction between L2 and L1 is now getting gray and grayer by the day. You could argue that Matic is not necessarily an L1. It could, not necessarily an L2, but it could even be treated as an L1. But the definition is very vague nowadays. And then you have things like Polkadot and Cosmos, which are more like started off as an interoperability project where you can actually run, parallel chains, or you can run your own smaller network and connect to the rest of the ecosystem. So definitely there are different approaches that are being done. It's very hard to say which one is going to be successful, but what I can guarantee is that at least what Binance has shown to us is that there is a community that wants alternative solutions, that wants to use something that's usable, that has better user experience. And if you provide them the right user, right dApps that they can get involved in, there's definitely a consumer base sitting for that. So I don't know who's going to win. I don't know. Maybe multiple people will win. That's very high possibility. But there's definitely a place and consumer that are actually waiting for these solutions for sure. Even within our community today, we are looking at, when we started Zilliqa, there were a certain number of users, and all they could do was to hold their tokens, right? Now they can take the tokens, put them on staking, on rewards. They could take them on Zilswap, on Zwap tokens. That's the incentive for the DEX. Once we build this Ethereum Zilliqa bridge, they will be able to interact with other outside chains as well. So we will live in a world where I suppose your assets will move from one chain to the other, and therefore, as long as there are enough parties, enough chains that produce and give people enough and interesting dApps, I think some of them will coexist for sure.
Do you believe, and I know that the Zilliqa community is quite strong, let's put it that way. If I tweet something about Zilliqa, I get some serious reactions, which is good. However, if you look at the people that are supporting in the token, they are quite verbal, and they believe that that's the only real solution for a project. Do you believe that there's going to be one winner, or is it more going to be like an ecosystem where everything is just integrated to each other and we're just communicating between the platforms and the system itself? Do you believe it's going that way?
I do think it's going that way. One, because people are realizing that different chains have different limitations. It could be network effect, it could be lack of dApps, it could be lack of consumers, it could be anything. And what we have also seen that consumers and dApp developers are actually looking for more consumers. So for example, when we looked at unstoppable domains, let's say I'm a dApp developer, and today I see that there's a community behind Zilliqa, a community behind Ethereum, and I'm going to develop my dApp on Ethereum. But I would be very stupid to say that, oh, I don't like Zilliqa community, and I'm not going to give you the same service for Zilliqa community. It's very stupid to say. If I'm a dApp developer and I see that there's a consumer base sitting on another chain, why would I not go and attract those consumers towards my dApps? And if I'm making money, why would I not do that? So I would say that maybe there are some maximalists who would say, no, I like my chain, I'm going to live and die on my chain. But in the end, I do see that if those people are pragmatic enough, they will realize that go and attract as many consumers who are sitting on other chains. Because the fact still remains today, when I interact with my community, I do feel that many of these community members could not get access or did not have the right expertise to even get access or be able to use Uniswap for a long time. Mm-hmm. And so there is a consumer who has not even interacted with DeFi yet. And if you say, I'm going to shut down on Ethereum, that's not how you can expand yourself. You need to look at the people who are actually sitting behind your walled gardens and try to attract them by providing them the right user experience to do that. So I do believe that the world we are moving towards, and Binance Chain, we can hate and like as much as we want Binance Chain, but at least if there's one thing that they have shown us is that people would like to use something more usable, and cross-chain thing is going to come up for sure.
Yeah, well, at least we can say that CZ is a really good businessman and he's fast in developing stuff. But one thing is that we can also see that with our financial system, the actual demand for DeFi systems is just growing and growing right now. So what do you see as a potential hurdle for mass adoption right now? Is it that scalability issue putting everything back? Or is it also user experience? Because my mom and dad simply don't know how to use Uniswap or anything that has something to do with blockchains. Has it to be more user-friendly to become mass adopted?
I would say that there's a combination of things, right? One is obviously there's so much of lingo being thrown around. I'm not saying that it's others. Even I do the same thing, because we live in a world where we have to impress other people in some sense. I know the only way you could do that, or at least some people do that, is by throwing lingo that other people don't understand, and that puts off people. Today, people can go and talk about AMM and Uniswap, but there are many different easier ways of explaining this and getting people involved in this, and throwing all sorts of lingo around how AMM work, about impermanent losses and all that. It's become very, it's not at all user exciting. It puts people off. Mm-hmm. And obviously, one approach that you have to take is just about education. When you educate people, we should not be using all that fancy lingo, for our consumers. That if I don't understand anything, I'm just blindly putting my money into it. And when I do that, that's very likely that I may lose money. And when I lose money, I'm going to stop and prevent everyone else in my family from getting involved with those things, because I don't understand. I would say that, you would not understand either. So there's a lot of education to be done, but that education has to be, absorbable. I should be able to absorb that education. It should not be that I should be doing a PhD to be able to understand how AMM works or how to lend and borrow my assets in some shape. So that's one thing. The second thing is user experience of using some of these assets is still very painful, right? In order to get, again, I'm not saying that Zilliqa is the best out there. I think it's something that plagues almost all chains that are out there and all dApps. There's still a lot of room for everyone to be able to push user experience at a different level. Today, for example, I cite this example every time. Today, when I download a random app from App Store, I don't go and read documentations and manual on how to use that app, that application. When I download Facebook, I just go and use Facebook. I never read how Facebook works. Recently, when I downloaded, a Revolut app or a new app, I don't have to read anything. I just go and use it. That's how applications should be, and that's how AMMs. That's how protocols like money market, protocols should exist. I should not be forced into reading documentations and going to GitHub to understand how the whole system works. That's if we are pushing people towards that, I don't see a light where we could actually bring more people towards the system rather than push people away. And even if you look at DeFi today, the number of people actually are involved in DeFi is very handful, probably 1,000 people, not more than that. And it actually shows up when I'm interacting with that community. I know that because I can feel people having hard time grasping some of these details. So user experience, scalability for sure, because the moment they see that you have to pay $500 just to swap a token, that's a no-no for sure. Because many of these people don't have that much money. Maybe in the Western world people do, but let's say people coming from Indonesia and India or other countries, they would like to be able to buy assets worth of $100 and not pay $500 as fees. So it's a combination of different things, and I think we have to work collectively as the ecosystem participants to be able to improve some of those aspects.
Well, if we discuss that, and I know from my own perspective, what I try to do is also to make that bridge between the known and the unknown, to explain how blockchain works and how the money system works. But then there is also the question for projects that they have to build platforms or like apps, which are very easy to use, like a Facebook, in which people simply don't even know that they are using a blockchain project. So in what way is Zilliqa providing developments towards that? What are you trying to do for that adoption in yourself or in the project itself?
Right. So this is you made a very valid point that you should not be forced to learn about blockchains. It's like when you go to a website today, you don't need to know that the website is running on AWS or Google Cloud or something else, right? And that has to go in the background. Unfortunately, the community is sort of, you have two types of communities today, right? One community would like to, of course, they are, you could call them maximalist, or you could call them, because they are vested interest into a certain system, they would like to talk about Zilliqa. And from a technical perspective, it makes things sound legit, right? Mm-hmm. When you talk about, oh, this is the most advanced thing that does sharding and all that fancy stuff, it makes it look like it's a fancy protocol that you should believe in. But the fact still remains that people don't understand this. So one thing, for example, we have done so far is we have been working with this company called Unstoppable Domains, where the idea is to remove the fact that you have to see and use an account address that reads like 0x1b5c. People don't even know that what this address, how to read that address, how to make sense of that address. So we have done that in terms of improving people's life by providing people access to a human readable name. So you could send money directly to michael.zil, for example, and not care about what Michael's address is. And so that makes life easier. But again, it's just purely when you're building, like even staking, I don't think I'm very happy with the staking portal that we have today, because today when people go on our staking portal, they still have to understand what unbonding period is and so on, which, the period when you can't take your money out. So my hope is that, over the next couple of months, we'll be improving purely from a user experience perspective. Is that every time you do something, you're notified of what is going to happen, what you expect to happen. And this way you don't have to go and learn about what unbonding period means, what buffer deposit is, and all that crap. You don't have to do that at all. So a lot of effort we have been putting towards making some of those things much simpler. Again, it's a journey that will take us time, because the fact still remains that we have removed passwords from the system, right? Now you don't need to use password. We have replaced that with a more complex system of private keys and public keys. And that researchers have been trying to do that for ages, and they had abandoned it for a long time because they felt that passwords are still the best way to get access to a system. And now you're saying that, no, let's move away from passwords and give them private key and public key. It's difficult to manage. The keys are difficult to manage, but hopefully we'll get there sometime soon, when people will be able to get access to some of the wallet providers that have social recovery systems. Even if you lose one of the private keys, you still have ability to actually recover that private key in some way. So I won't say that we have done everything, but we are taking baby steps towards improving the life of people.
Well, you can see it in the phone industry as well. We used to have those PIN codes, and right now we just use fingerprint or face scan or whatever. So it's also improving in those technologies. And I believe that even my mom and dad, if they want to stake, they should not be using anything like MetaMask and all those hassle to get the staking going. So there's still a lot to gain there. But also, if we discuss the DeFi market, that's just heating up. Zilliqa, Zilswap, there's a lot of stuff as well going on there. Skilla is going on there. How are you seeing the entire DeFi industry, and how is Zilliqa positioning itself in that perspective?
Well, one angle that I guess one reason that DeFi has definitely picked up is around because of incentives. The people have realized that I think 1 year ago, before staking existed on any of the chains, people used to buy a certain token, even though it was a utility token. One of the main reasons that we were buying it was because they felt that there was a speculative value to it, right? They could speculate on it, and hopefully in a year's time or something, they could sell it off. Now they have more options, right? They could take their assets, they can put those assets to use, either through staking or through some of those mechanisms DeFi has brought up. So people have realized that instead of putting their money in their bank account, which earns them nothing, and in some cases negative interest rate, they could take that money, convert that, even if you forget about speculative asset, even if they just stay at stable coin level, right? You could take those, convert that fiat into stable coins, and then put that to work and earn at least, I guess, 10% returns based on just stable coin. And so that definitely has kicked the momentum around what people can do with their money. And obviously there's this broader vision that, people should be able to use all the financial applications that they use today in their daily life, like mortgage, insurance, banking, so on, in a way that runs on a decentralized infrastructure. And all that they need to be able to use that infrastructure is just a mobile phone with internet connection. That's all that they need. They don't need KYC, and that's a powerful vision. My hope is that, and this is what we are seeing today, right, is people are building some of these products that basically mimics some of those applications. For example, insurance, let's say, lending products, and so on. Some of these are somewhat tailored to the crypto market. For example, the insurance products today, they are targeting a very specific risk, which is the technological risk, right? So if, for example, if today you're staking, you're putting your money into lending protocols and so on, there's a technological risk that you're taking, which is probably not present in many of the systems that are out there, in traditional finance. So the risk is different. The products can be different. But yeah, there's a momentum there where the idea is to be able to replicate all those traditional financial systems on top of blockchain, which you can access just with a mobile phone. That I find really powerful. And both us and the entire ecosystem is driving applications towards it, for example, through decentralized exchanges, through stable coins, which are not stable coin backed by fiat, but stable coin which are algorithmic in that sense, money market protocols, insurance products, and so on. So a lot of these things are actually being developed that people would be able to get access to without needing to do KYC. But hopefully, at some point of time, the traditional financial systems and the DeFi will converge somewhere, and we are seeing the gap closing on a daily basis.
Well, if we're going to discuss that topic, I can talk for an hour more, because I guess I think we're going to a turning point, or like DeFi markets are heating up, traditional markets are getting on the edge of falling down. So we are definitely getting at that flipping point. But when we discuss stable currencies, etc., Zilliqa also has Zilswap, which is basically a DEX, right? So what is the purpose of Zilswap, and how much is locked inside that platform right now? And what are you trying to achieve with that for the coming year?
So Zilswap is a DEX very similar to Uniswap in that sense. The design is a little bit different. Implementation is a little bit different. Yeah. So it's the design is very similar to some of the AMs that you are familiar with, and the DEXs that you're familiar with. One reason that we obviously launched DEX, because if you want to enter into the DeFi space, there are two basic things that you need. So two base ideas and base, let's say, ingredients. One is a stable coin, because you can't go into DeFi and always have a speculative asset floating around. So you need something to exit. You need something stable in some sense. So we needed a stable coin for sure. That's the base start. And the second thing was that many of these DeFi or many of these projects that will come up eventually will have tokens in there. And you need people to provide, you need to give people a marketplace where they can trade those tokens in some way. And obviously you can argue that, okay, you can go and chase Binance or Coinbase and KuCoin and the likes and get those tokens listed. But you need to do that in a decentralized way, or permissionless way. So the only way you could do it by building a DEX on which these tokens could be traded around. So that's the reason why you see stablecoin, which is in our case the Singapore dollar-backed stablecoin. We are hoping to bring a USD-backed stablecoin as well. So that's the reason why you see a stablecoin coming into picture, and then a DEX, Zilswap, coming in. And that was, again, Zilswap is not very old in that sense. It was launched in October, mid-October, I would say. If I recall my numbers correctly, we have logged close to $35 million worth of assets in that contract. Since the launch of ZWAP tokens, which is the incentive token for people to provide liquidity. It's actually, I'm pretty proud of what we have achieved in that short period of, I think, 30 days. One, because obviously our community is much smaller compared to, let's say, Ethereum community. One. Number two is the number of assets that are there is much smaller. We have only three main assets. So one is ZIL, the governance token, the Zwap token, which is the incentive token for LP providers, and the third is the XG, the Singapore dollar-backed stablecoin. So with only three assets, we are able to lock $35 million worth of assets in that DEX. Now, if you compare it with the Ethereum DEXs that are out there, and if you list all of them by total value logged, we are somewhere between number 9 and number 10. So around that. So which shows to you that within a matter of 1 month, with only three assets in play, we have been able to log this much of assets, and the ranking is there. In the hope, and our hope is that once we build this ETH Zilliqa bridge, then we'll be able to bring more assets on top of the platform, and then hopefully people will be able to provide more liquidity, and then hopefully TVL will go further up. So that's the plan with this. In parallel, we have also been running a NFT marketplace in parallel, which is the Mintable marketplace. As you can imagine, NFT is also heating up in the space today. So we have also taken a little bit of step there as well, talking to celebrities. Some of the celebrities have already launched some of the NFTs token as well on Zilliqa and Mintable. And then on the third marketplace is the securities exchange. So you come from that background. We have in Singapore applied for a license with the MAS, which is the local regulatory authority, to be able to launch launch a centralized exchange that can handle securities. So very recently we tokenized the whiskey, and the hope is that we'll be able to bring private equities and SpaceX, hopefully, and those sort of things on that platform one day that people can get access to.
Well, it's interesting that we are currently living in a landscape where regulations are kicking in, but we also need more safety measures. So I've got some questions regarding that topic, and you've brought it up already that you're going for that in Singapore. Is how are you going to deal with all those regulations kicking in? Like, for instance, in Europe, we get regulations. I've seen the papers from the ECB. I can also know that it's from the SEC in the United States. It could influence all those fiat-backed currencies, right?
Yep.
And how do you plan to work with that? Are you going to cooperate with those regulators, or are you going to just use the DEX and just see whatever happens? Or
okay, to be honest, we have again, we have been in touch with MAS, which is the local Singaporean regulatory body at different levels. So, for example, when we were launching the Singapore dollar-backed stablecoin with the help of experts, experts, by the way, is a regulated entity in Singapore. So it gives us, we have been in touch with MAS in different shape and forms. They are somewhat aware of all these initiatives that are actually going on the blockchain. For example, they know that experts had decided to launch a Singapore dollar-backed stablecoin on top of Zilliqa, so they're aware of that. They know, for example, that when we applied for the license for this securities exchange, they know that this exchange is actually a part of that infrastructure, and the backend is actually being built on Zilliqa. It's actually running on Zilliqa. They were very aware of that. Again, not everything is clear from regulators, what's allowed and what's not allowed. But as far as we can go, we try to cooperate with them in whatever capacity we can. But again, it's the guidelines are not clear, sadly. So you can't say that this is allowed, this is not allowed, and what category you fall in. But we definitely stay in touch with MAS every now and then, and we would like to give them feedback on whatever we think makes sense from our side, and obviously for the broader blockchain ecosystem, and help them in whatever capacity we can, either in terms of shaping the policy, or in terms of giving them ideas on what can be done and what's very hard to do. I mean, the other problem is that this technology landscape is moving so fast.
Yeah.
That's very. I remember watching a video in the parliament Singapore where one of the ministers were actually discussing DeFi. I highly doubt other. So there are people doing it, but again, things move so fast. Yield farming didn't exist, before the last summer, right? Mm-hmm. So the question is, how can the regulators keep up with all the momentum and the speed at which things are going on? That's a nightmare, I'm sure, for those people, which is difficult.
Well, in general, technology is just accelerating so fast. I can just remember watching the entire lawsuit against Facebook and stuff. They're still working on frameworks for privacy. So regardless of that, they can't even build anything towards DeFi as they're just exploring the entire environment. So that's difficult. But if we discuss that they probably are just lagging behind, we have to make some safety measures ourselves. And for Zilliqa, you're trying to make those smart contracts more safe, and you're using Skilla, if I say it right, for it.
It's Zilla.
Zilla, okay. Well, it's the C, it's a K in the Netherlands, so that's the difference.
Yeah.
Do you believe that this will make smart contracts more safe, or it's trying to achieve that?
No, I think entire community, if you have to be taken seriously by the regulators, you have to make sure, and we have to collectively make sure that the contracts that are going to handle this much of money have to be made sure, and at any cost. You cannot compromise on that. We have seen the DeFi space people flaunting that they were able to build the system over a weekend and it's ready to go. And then within a matter of 2 days, they said that, oh, we have $100 million of log. That's not the right approach. You can't build something over the weekend without getting people to look at your code and say, we are good to go. That's not the right way. And this is exactly why regulators feel a little bit uncomfortable with some of the approach that people have been taking there, right? So one is obviously we have to be more put a little bit of self-restraint on ourselves and say, look, let's be serious about it. If we are asking people to put money into this, we have to make sure that, one, the language in which we are writing is safe, which could, for example, I'm not saying that Zilla is the only language out there, but of course, let's go with a better language. And again, Ethereum Foundation itself is developing more language other than Solidity. For example, Viper is one language which is designed to be a better version of Solidity. They have been working on some language called FE, which is again a better version of Solidity. So they themselves are looking for a language that can be safer for people to write contracts in. And Zilla is another contribution to that space. But there's also, I would say, a self-responsibility. You can't keep flaunting that, oh, here's something that I wrote over my dinner and then it's ready to go tomorrow, and put your money there if you want to. Well, you can put disclaimers as much you want, but it's not a responsible way of going about it, right? And so we do feel that whatever, and this is something that we have in our ethos as well, is that coming from a research angle and security background, I do feel that we have to invest time and resource into getting something right rather than pushing something quick. And so I would rather wait until something I feel confident to put my money into before I can ask someone else to use it. So that's something that I should, when I really feel that the community should strive to go for.
Well, it's funny that you're saying, because I do remember that during 2017, some projects were really moving forward with marketing without even a working product. And there is also a group of people, usually they are coming from universities and stuff, that are just wanting to have a working product, and then they start to market that product, which is the other way around. And I guess Zilliqa is the one that first has to have a working product, and then they start to focus on that adoption. And I think that's the right way. Discussing moving forward, what can we expect from Zilliqa for the coming year? What are some key features that we have to look for in the coming period for Zilliqa and the rest of the ecosystem?
Right. So obviously there's always a lot of work that goes into, it's not so visible because it's complex, but there's a lot of work that goes into the platform side. So making sure that the platform remains more robust, it remains resistance against attacks, it's more optimized for better throughput, also more throughput. It's optimized for lower latencies and so on, so that people's general experience when they interact with the chain is much better. So a lot of what actually goes into that, and we'll continue going into that. Unfortunately, this is at a platform level, so it's like optimizing your AWS cloud and systems. So it's not that visible, and we won't be able to market that because it's too difficult to market that. But a lot of work will go into that. That's one angle. The second angle is about the ecosystem work, right? So far in the DeFi space, I would say we have initiated, let's say, 3 projects or 3 key pillar projects. One is around staking. Number 2 is Zilswap, so the DEX, and the third is stable coins, right? Now, if you look at the staking, I would say that we have been staking in general has been very successful, because within a matter of, I think, 3-4 months, we have been able to lock, north of $600 million worth of assets in that contract. Now, the question is, what to do with that liquidity, right? You can't just hope that the liquidity stays there and does nothing other than generating returns for the users. So we're actually thinking of mechanisms where you can put that liquidity to use. So one idea that we had was we have something called Pillar coming up, which is a MakerDAO like system where you can put ZIL as a collateral and then mint a pillar stablecoin. So the idea is to be able to sort of channel that staking liquidity towards that pillar protocol. So you'd be able to mint, again, not fully, but at least partially be able to move that. One way to do it, for example, is to every staker, if you stake, let's say $100 worth of ZILs, then you get issued a new token called BZIL, bonded ZIL, which is, let's say, 75 bonds of ZIL will be issued to you. So it gives you leverage on your liquidity that you have already logged in. So for example, you could take this 75 BZIL, you could buy more ZILs using that, or you could buy stable coins, you could buy something else, and so on. So you could do whatever you wanted with that BZIL. So it gives you leverage. And the only thing is that when you want to take your stake out, you have to return back that 75 BSL to be able to take your money out. So it's like your margin, whatever essentially leverage that you see in the traditional world. And this way, it will allow us to actually make use of that liquidity that's trapped right now in the staking contract. Now, moving on to, so that's a lot of work is going to go into taking staking to the next level. So be able to move that and use that liquidity. On the Zilswap side, we obviously, for a long time, at least when we started, we realized that there was not a strong incentive for people to put liquidity into Zilswap. But now that we have launched the Zwap token, now people have strong incentive. In fact, it looks like they have more incentive right now to put money in the Zilswap than on staking. Of course, the risks, the risks are different, but there's definitely a strong incentive for Zilswap holders there. But the next level is to actually bring more assets. We only have 3 assets today. As I mentioned, ZIL, Zwap, and XGD. So the idea is to be able to bring more assets so that people can actually trade those assets on Zilswap and boost the trading volume. And the hope is that once we build this Ethereum Zilliqa bridge, some of the assets, for example, your favorite ERC20 token, let's, I don't know, call it Aave, Compound, whatever you think of, could be brought over to Zilliqa, and you'll be able to provide, liquidity and use them to trade. We are also thinking, by the way, I've seen that some of the chains are actually building some of the bridges as well. One of the pain points that people are complaining is that when you move your assets from Ethereum to a new chain, there is a one-time cost that you have to pay because the first transaction still happens on Ethereum, and that would still be costly. I'm thinking of whether we could channel a portion of our staking rewards or something to offset that cost so that people will have incentive to move their assets. And once they have moved their assets from Ethereum to Zilliqa, they could actually go on Zilswap, and then they can earn more incentives from there. So that's on Zilswap. On stable coins, obviously we have developed we have launched the stable coin, Singapore dollar-backed stable coin, but of course, SGD is not USD, right? So there's a different appeal of USD-backed stable coin. So hopefully, the plan is to be able to bring some USD-backed stable coin either directly, natively, by bringing, I don't know, things like, again, I don't know to name because people will think that it's coming, but traditional USD-backed stablecoin like USDT, USDC, those sort of things. At the same time, be able to bring assets from using that Ethereum Zilliqa bridge towards Zilliqa. So, for example, you have USDT or USDC on Ethereum today, you can wrap them up and bring them to Zilliqa. So that's one way. We are also thinking of building, or actually talking to parties to build an yield generating product for SGD as well. So today, for example, you can take your USD or USDT and lend them to people and earn, I don't know, 5 to 10% returns on that, right? We are thinking of actually building a similar market for Singapore dollars as well. Again, it's a long work. It's going to be a lot of work there, but we are thinking of providing an yield generating product for Singapore dollars as well. But at least the good news today is that people who are living in Singapore can take their money from their bank account, convert that into XGD, and put that on Zilswap and earn returns on that, which you can't get if you have that into your bank account. So, again, a lot of these incentives these initiatives are going to go for, we are going to go for that. And at the same time, there are some initiatives on NFT space as well. So I would say that the next at least 8 months is going to be very packed, chasing some of these projects and making sure that people can deliver, we can deliver value to the token holders that we have in the Zilliqa community.
We can expect enough from the Zilliqa ecosystem in general, but you've mentioned something that people can take the money from their bank account, swap it towards the ecosystem, and get a return on it. Aren't you afraid that that's going to cause a bank run at some point, or that's going to be a tipping point?
Obviously, this is not of financial advice.
No, but I mean, in general, that is what we're creating right now with DeFi, right?
Exactly.
So that
And
could trigger the system.
and people are definitely seeing that the fact that the traditional systems are charging them something. I mean, in order to put your money into bank account today, you actually have to pay. I mean, in some countries, you definitely have to pay returns on that, negative returns there. And the question is, and in those countries, people actually, even people who are building stable coins in those countries, they're thinking of how to actually build stable coins that doesn't take people's money in return. Because in the end, if they issue stable coins, someone has to store that fiat somewhere. And if that fiat is stored in a bank account, then the bank you will have to pay that, the issuer of that stable coin will have to pay the bank account some money to be able to pay that, right? So obviously people are, again, this is a sentiment that I'm feeling and getting, is that people are actually trying to move some of their money from bank accounts to tokenized dollars and then earn returns from that. That's what DeFi is promising them in some way, is that you could actually go and build a parallel financial system that's much more efficient in some sense. And one of the reasons why some of these systems are expensive is because there's a lot of bureaucracy behind that, right? Mm-hmm. While in the DeFi space, there's one contract that does everything for you. So there's a lot of capital efficiency that goes when you move from traditional finance to finance that's backed by blockchains, and people are actually moving towards it. So that's the promise in any sense. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need all those buildings, you don't need the working staff, etc., etc. So you can actually work to a protocol that don't need trust, just verification. That's also why Bitcoin is growing so large currently.
Exactly.
To round off this beautiful conversation, I've got a question for you personally. What is your ultimate goal to achieve in this entire ecosystem, or just in life? I mean, you're now attached to Zilliqa. You are very enthusiastic about blockchain, but what do you want to achieve?
Well, some people often say that you have to. This is and this is what I hear from community all the time, and it's not something that's specific to Zilliqa as a community. But what I definitely feel that people always say, no, go and someone is doing this, someone is doing that. You should go and chase that. You should do the same thing, and so on. I think chasing a narrative, it only takes you that far. You have to build that narrative yourself. You have to build something. The reason why Bitcoin is Bitcoin, and we can hate as much as we want about the fees that you have to pay Ethereum and so on, but they have delivered something that has changed a lot of people, the way a lot of people actually interact with the system, right? So obviously, my personal goal is to be able to deliver to everyone something that builds a narrative that allows other people to go for that and build something similar in their own lives. But again, I don't know what that idea would be, but the ultimate goal in my life to do something like that for people.
Well, that's a wonderful mission. I'm going to thank you, Amrit, for this beautiful conversation. Do you have something to say to the listeners, or where can we find you, or the Zilliqa community that you want to share with us?
Yeah, well, I think many of our team, but this is something that I've pushed into our team, this ethos that we have to be open-minded to our community and we have to interact with the community. So we don't sit on horses and high horses and command people. We are always there. So on Twitter, on Telegram, you ping us, and we are always there to respond to your questions and doubts. So I invite you, for those who are listening to you and who are Zilliqa community members, you probably would know us. But for those who are new and only know Michael, I would invite you to follow us on Twitter and Telegram, and we would love to interact with you and get ideas and share ideas that you may have.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Amrit.
Thank you very much, Michael, for inviting me here. Thank you very much. It was lovely talking to you.
Cheers.